The thought of buying a home today might seem overwhelming. Maybe you've never purchased a home before and you're not sure what are all the steps. Are you really ready? Well, you're going to want to watch today's video where I am going to go over the home buying process from A to Z and include a couple of facts and figures that it's just not necessarily readily known or making the news. So in the next couple moments, if you're needing to grab a cup of coffee, grab a notepad to take notes, or if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel yet, just go ahead and click the subscribe button and the bell for updates, and I'll be right back and we will dive in to the process of purchasing a home in 2024. Whether this is your first time buying a home, or maybe you've purchased a home before and you're downsizing and you're thinking of buying your next home, and it's been 10, 15, or 20 years, this video is for you. Home buying doesn't always remain the same. Things might vary in changing markets. Here in the Los Angeles area, California in general, we are an escrow state. But there are steps to buying a home. I'm going to break down 10 key steps that really apply to the home buying process no matter where you're at in the country. It just might vary whether you are an attorney state or an escrow state. So let's dive right in. The very first thing you need to do when you're considering purchasing a home is plan your finances. And what does that mean? Well, buying a home costs money. We all know that, right? Either you're paying cash or you're financing a portion of it. But the things that you need to think about are about 3 points: your down payment on the home, your closing costs, and your earnest money deposit. Now, your earnest money deposit typically comes out of your down payment against your loan. Your down payment might be anywhere from 0 to 20%. Your closing costs on average are about 2.5% of your purchase price. When you put 20% down, you do not have to pay PMI, which is private mortgage insurance. This is something that protects lenders from you defaulting on a loan. It doesn't protect you, but yet it is a bill you will have to carry if you are putting down less than 20%. Because you would get an what's commonly referred to as an 80-20, an 80% loan for the bulk of your financing and then 20% for the remainder. And then you would just come in with your closing costs. And of course, depending on what type of market you're in, whether it's a seller's market or buyer's market, sometimes you can wrap those closing costs into your loan by offering more and asking for a credit back on your closing costs. That's not the market we're in today. Just a tip to keep in your toolbox for the future. The market we're in today is definitely a seller's market, and it's a lot harder to get those costs covered. Now, you need to determine how much you're putting down, whether that's going to be 5%, 10%, 20%. With 3.5% down, you can qualify for an FHA loan. And depending on where you're at, there are other loan programs. I hear from time to time with people like, hey, I heard Bank of America has this new program, or I can get a grant. You need to know when it comes to the grant programs provided by the states and cities, those things fill up very quickly. And sometimes some of these programs are very limited to specific areas, and it might not be the area you're looking to buy in. So those are some things in this financial planning process you might want to look into. As I mentioned, your closing costs are about 2.5%. Your closing costs are basically everything involved with buying the home and finalizing that purchase. It's your title insurance, it's your prepaid taxes, it's your escrow fees, the recording fees, just all of those costs in general. Again, I usually tell my clients if you plan for about 2.5%, you're usually in good shape and have a little bit of money over, which could help when it comes to buying new furniture or maybe doing a repainting. Now, in Los Angeles, we typically put down 3% for our earnest money deposit. Other states, it's a little different. Sometimes it's 5%. Sometimes it's a flat amount of like maybe $5,000. Or if you're trying to be aggressive, it might be a little bit more. But here in California, specifically the Los Angeles area, we don't do more than 3% because contractually you are protected up to 3%. If you put down more in your earnest money deposit, that money can be at risk, and we don't want to put you at risk. With your income, you're going to need to show that you've been gainfully employed or an entrepreneur with steady income for at least 2 years. Most lenders want to see you working for a solid 2 years in the same industry. You might have switched jobs, but perhaps you stayed in the same industry. Maybe you're a doctor and you left Cedars-Sinai and went over to Kaiser, or vice versa. As long as you're in that same industry, they will count that as a solid 2 years income. Let's talk credits. Now, typically 640 was the lowest credit score you needed to be able to qualify for a loan. In the past, the lower your credit score, the higher your interest rate. And so usually trying to aim for boosting your credit score up to over 7% is what's going to get you the highest interest rate. Now, if you remember back in 2023, Biden administration passed something that can actually work against you when it comes to interest rates when you have good credit. Best thing to do is to talk with your loan officer. There's been so much back and forth about that. The biggest thing to perhaps overcome something like that is what I mentioned before, doing 2 loans for the purchase. And this will depend on where you're at, what you qualify for, if you're able to do 2 loans and maybe kind of bypass that and still get great interest rates. Something else you can do though is what's called recasting the loan a little bit later, where maybe you come in with only 5% down and a couple months later you take that remaining 15%, pay on the loan and recast the loan. There's always the option of refinancing as well. But again, these are a couple tips and tricks to get the best scores, not the best scores, but the best interest rates and things to talk about with your lender. If you are searching for a home, you can register on my website to browse all the properties that are currently on the market here in Los Angeles. My website is very interactive. You can create your own fun experience. You can communicate with me through the website. You can send me a text and I will get it immediately. We can have dialogue about a property that you think is fun and exciting. We can schedule appointments and it's all free. The best part of it is it only comes to me. I never share or sell your information. You are completely protected. All you have to do is visit CorrieLuxuryHomes.com and set up your free account. Step 2, hire a realtor to represent you. Now, I know sometimes people think if I go to the listing agent, I'm going to get the best deal. That's not necessarily true. Sometimes people think that if I go to the listing agent, that's going to give me an advantage because the listing agent would get paid twice. Honestly, if the listing agent is working for the best interest of their client, that's not going to matter. What's really important is that you look at experience and track record. And there's a lot of websites out there, because they are not connected to our MLS multiple listing service, they don't have accurate information on agent sales records. I say, if you want to know what your agent has sold, ask them to provide you the proof. Going into the MLS, pulling that data together, it takes a little time, but it's not a big deal. There's so much fluff out there, right? At the end of the day, you want to know that you can trust your real estate agent, that they're going to fight for you and do a good job. You also should make sure that your real estate agent is a full-time agent and not somebody that works another job that says, oh, hey, I can take care of that for you. Meanwhile, they're, a nurse and they sell real estate on the side, or they're a teacher and they sell real estate on the side. You want someone that works in this industry day in and day out, that's staying on top of the changes in the laws, the changes in contracts, what's happening, where the market is at, that's tracking the market. Those things are really important to you. So it's really something you should spend a little time with, maybe interview a couple agents, sit down, have an agent explain the process to you from start to finish, really answer any questions so that you can feel them out and decide if it's the best fit. Now, one of the things that is kind of interesting over the years, I've heard agents say this, the cost for a buyer's agent. And I've heard agents say, oh, it doesn't cost you anything. And that's technically not true. The commission that is paid to your agent, the buyer's agent, is typically coming out of the proceeds of the sale from the seller's side. And that's been done that way historically, really, so that it can be covered by your loan. Because lenders are not going to lend you the cost for the commission for your agent. They're just not. That would end up being another thing you would have to save for. Now, some of you might be aware that there has been a lawsuit with NAR, Burnett versus NAR, and that was in Missouri, where a seller later had seller's remorse and felt like they overpaid on commission, even though the commission was spelt out, even though they agreed to all the commissions they paid. They just later felt like, hey, I could have made more money if I wouldn't have paid so much. And so they have pulled a lawsuit. And because of this, there's been a number of lawsuits coming out of the woodwork. Could the way your buyer's agent be paid change? Yes. It absolutely could become your responsibility and your responsibility alone, instead of being wrapped into the proceeds of the purchase itself and ultimately wrapped into your loan. Hopefully that doesn't happen, because my fear with that is that most people would say, well, I'm already paying and saving up 2.5% for my closing costs. I've already saved up 5-10% down for my mortgage. I just can't spend another year saving up another, $15,000-$20,000 to pay commission. I'll just go unrepresented. Not a good idea. Buyer's representation came about in this country because buyers were not being represented, and the sole party in the sale and transactions of purchasing a property were protecting the sellers. And so far too often buyers got kind of stiffed in the deal. I mean, think about lemon laws with cars. Imagine buying a used car, not knowing anything about it, not being told anything about it, buying it, and it falls apart later. The whole reason you have a buyer's agent is to look out for your best interest, to negotiate for you, and to protect you as much as possible. One of the things I always say to my clients is my biggest concern is to protect your money at all costs. Now, as we move on with this, one of the things to understand is why these lawsuits are around to begin with. Yes, there was some seller remorse, but I really have seen over the last 20 years, the big companies like Redfin, Zillow, who have this great online presence, which has been wonderful. Like before, you couldn't live in California and look at a property in New York unless you had an agent in New York sending you property. And even likewise, as an agent, I couldn't tap in to property in New York. These websites have been amazing for letting you see what's going on in other countries and kind of doing your own research, if you will, right? But they've also really been after a piece of commission, because they look at the real estate industry as a whole and the commission structures in real estate and say, hey, we can get a piece of that pie. How do they do it? By trying to turn the consumers against agents, by trying to eliminate some agents so that they can step in and get a bigger piece of the pie. So rest assured, I'm pretty suspicious that they're behind all these lawsuits. Anyhow, if this should occur in the future, something to think about. Again, I just feel like right now the way it's structured is the best way to go, but this is something to question your agent on. I know I have my buyers sign exclusive buyer agency agreements. This is so that I can represent you to the best of my ability. This is so I can go out and look for property that is not currently on the market and negotiate with that seller to list it, or not necessarily list it, but to be able to show it to you and start negotiations for you so that you can buy a home that's off market. If we're not representing you exclusively and you're talking to 5, 6, 7 agents and they're all sending you the same properties, it just kind of dials down. If I have you, who's not working with me exclusively, and John, who's working with me exclusively, and you both want the same type of home in the same area, and I'm working for John, talking to sellers that have not listed their home yet, that are thinking about selling, having those conversations, who do you think I'm going to let know about the property? You or John? So something we can think about. Now, one thing to also consider when you're talking to agents is look for an agent that's familiar with the area that you are looking into. Look for an agent who's experienced working with first-time home buyers if this is your first time buying a home, because they'll be able to kind of hold your hand a little bit more, walk you through the process a little bit more, and just really understand some of the concerns that a first-time home buyer might have versus someone that buys a new home every 3 to 5 years. You need to know you don't have to have a real estate agent for every area you're considering. Let's say you're here in Los Angeles and you live in Santa Monica and you're looking at buying in the San Fernando Valley. You don't need to have an agent in the San Fernando Valley and an agent in Hancock Park, maybe, because that's an area you're considering. As you're interviewing agents, talk to them about the areas you're thinking about. Ask them if they're experienced in some of these areas, if they're familiar. Your agent does not have to live in the neighborhood you're looking to buy. They just need to be familiar. They need to know it. They need to show it. Maybe they've worked in it before. Maybe they've lived in the area before. one of the things that I always like to share with my clients is I lived on the west side for years, and then I moved to the San Fernando Valley. I work both sides of the hill, and I work in a broad area because I've also lived in other parts of Southern California. I grew up in Irvine. I lived on the edge of LA County in Irvine. I'm sorry, not LA County in Irvine, the edge of LA County and San Bernardino County. So typically every year I do sales out in that area. I know these areas. So that's the bigger thing you want to be concerned with, because if you limit yourself to an agent that you say, okay, I want to buy, let's just say in Encino, and this agent has lived in Encino all their life, and because they've lived in Encino all their life, I believe they know Encino better than another agent, and they're going to help me find the home. And maybe that home is not coming up, versus an agent that works a broader area and maybe has found your perfect home in Thousand Oaks or Westlake Village that is everything you were looking for at a better price. But if you limited yourself to the agent that only works that neighborhood, that only knows that neighborhood, you might never get to your perfect home. So just some things to consider. Let's jump to step 3. Getting your pre-approval. Now, this is important because if you don't know how much you're approved for, if you're purchasing a home with financing, you really don't know where to look. If you're purchasing a home cash, don't worry about this part. But if you have to finance a portion of your purchase, it's really important because you might be looking too high or you might be looking too low. There's different types of loans. There's conventional loans, there's FHA loans, there's VA loans if you're a former veteran, there's entrepreneurial loans. Once you've hired your realtor, I really recommend you get referrals from your real estate agent to lenders. The reason being is, especially if your real estate agent works in this industry full time, they've had experiences doing business with various lenders, and they know which lenders will step up to the plate and fight for you to get your purchase done, and which ones will just kind of let things slide and fall to the wayside and won't go the extra mile when there's a problem. You really want someone that's going to represent you and go the extra mile if things go left, because sometimes problems crop up during the purchase of a home. The last thing you want is some guy that has so much business that he's just not concerned. There are big banks that you can go to, like Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America. They do what's known as A-paper loans, which means you basically have to fit in a little box. W-2 employee, have to have a very specific credit score. If you don't meet their criteria, they can't give you a loan. I don't recommend the online lenders like Rocket Mortgage or Quicken Loan. Kind of what I just mentioned before, so much volume that they're not as concerned, not as involved. Really what I think, in my experience, and take this with a grain of salt, I started off in this industry working as a loan officer, but I think mortgage brokers are going to be your best bet because they have access to a wider range of products than an A-paper lender like a big bank, and they don't necessarily have to place your loan with their own in-house lending. They can work with other companies. The next other option you might think about is a credit union if you're with a credit union. Now, me personally, every car I've ever purchased, I've purchased with a credit union, and it has always given me the best interest rate. I can't say the same for buying a home. And I've bought, how many homes have I bought over the years? 6 homes over the years, and I've never gone with a credit union. But if you are with a credit union, maybe you want to check that out. Keep in mind too, sometimes banks have a deal, whereas if you move a large sum of money over to their bank, whether that's $30,000 or $50,000, they'll give you a little bit of break on the interest rate. That might be something worth looking into. But again, I just say go back and talk to your agent, ask them for some recommendations, talk to those lenders so that you can find the best fit in terms of personality, because I guarantee you the loan process will be one of the most stressful parts of this entire process of buying a home, and you want to be able to communicate well with somebody. Now, when it comes to that pre-approval, there are a couple of things you need to get. Now, I really want to clarify this. You want a pre-approval, not a pre-qual. A pre-qual means nothing. A pre-qual is not worth the piece of paper it is written on. I was looking for a piece of paper to show you, but it's just not worth the piece of paper it's written on. It means nothing. A pre-approval, they've actually done the start of a dive. You need your last 2 years of taxes. You need 2 months of bank statements. You'll need your last 2 paycheck stubs, or if you're an entrepreneur, your last 2 payments received for whatever type of services you're providing, and they do a hard credit pull. Here's the big thing that you need to understand. When it comes to getting a loan, if you are a self-employed, 1099 entrepreneur, chances are you're going to need to go with a stated loan, a bank statement loan program, because your income is probably a little inconsistent. And a bank statement loan program allows them to take and look at all of your deposits and incoming revenues and average that out in order to qualify you. So that's just something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, a credit pull, for the sake of your pre-approval, is always a hard pull. And what a hard pull means is it's when your lender pulls your credit report from one of the 3 main credit bureaus. They typically do a tri-merge report, which means they're pulling from Experian, Equifax, excuse me, and TransUnion, and they're going with the mid-score. Not the highest, not the lowest, but the mid-score. A hard inquiry is done anytime you apply for a credit card, excuse me, a personal loan, a car loan, or any other form of credit. Ooh, sorry about that, folks. So when it comes to pulling your credit, I know sometimes buyers can get nervous, especially if it's your first time buying a home and let's say your credit score is like right at the 640, you're worried about it dipping down a little bit. Yes, having your credit pulled by a mortgage lender will drop you about 5 points on average, but it does bounce back up. The thing that you need to understand though is when it comes to your credit history and your credit reporting, they expect you to shop around for a loan. So as long as you shop around and pull within that same 30-day cycle, it should not impact you as much. Now, I know there's some information out there that it's a 45 days, but I always have recommended to my clients ever since I worked in the mortgage business, 30 days. That reason is you don't know necessarily where you're at in your credit reporting cycle unless you happen to be someone that checks your credit every month. You know exactly what days every single one of your credit card companies reports to the credit bureaus. But if you just try to keep everything clustered very tightly within that 30-day cycle, it'll only count as one hit. I recommend, honestly, even less than 30 days. If you're talking to 3 different lenders that have been recommended to you, talk to them in the space of 3 days so everything's clustered really tightly together. Do it quickly. Now, most lenders want to see your credit score at a 660 since COVID hit. But again, there are some programs out there that you can qualify for 640. Most pre-approvals are good for up to 3 months. Some are good for 6 months. But typically when you get past that 3-month period, they want to run your credit again and just make sure that nothing has changed. Okay. Let's go into step 4, which is house hunting. This can be one of the most fun parts of the home buying process because you get out there and you see a couple homes and this, that, and the other. I want to say this is not the time to go and see 50 homes. If you want to do all that, you should do that before you start this home buying process. I don't know, go look at open houses on Sundays before football games or after church. This is the time to hone in on what you want and need. I always recommend you create your needs and wants list. So for example, consider how large your family is. Or if you're planning to have kids in the next few years, where do you commute to work if you're living here in Los Angeles? Or do you work from home? Then there's the wants. What do you like to do on the weekend? Are you a surfer? Do you like to go on hikes? Are you all about the mountains and you go to Big Bear every chance you can get, every holiday, every weekend? Do you swim? Do you want a pool? Tennis courts? Do you want a horse? Are you wanting a horse on your property instead of paying rental fees? Do you want to have chickens for fresh eggs and you need a chicken coop? Do you need room to grow your own vegetables and herbs? Again, sit down and really think this through. What are your needs and what are your wants? And then I strongly recommend you talk with your realtor about these things. Narrow it down to the top most important 5 items. And I'm going to tell you something. You will never find a home that has everything you want. But, well, unless you do a custom build and you have the funds to do that. But if you hit 3 out of 5 items, it's a win. If you and your realtor are on the same page and you've had your consultation, you've signed your exclusive buyer's agency agreement, you've gotten your pre-approval, and you've made your needs and wants list, this will probably move relatively quickly. Don't get alarmed. If you've never purchased a home before and the very first home you see is the right one, don't get scared. I've worked with a lot of first-time home buyers in the course of my career, and I'll never forget, there's actually 2 that the very first home I showed them was the right one. One got so overwhelmed by this, they did not make an offer, and when they finally decided to, it was already sold. If your agent has really heard what you were saying and has really combed through what's on the market and maybe has gone out and viewed a couple homes before bringing you the ones that they believe are the best fit for you, this should move quickly, okay? This is the time for you to both be super hyper focused and to be strategic, and working together, you will find the right home. Step 5 is making an offer. So when you find a home that meets the majority of your needs that you like, it's time to write an offer. Don't second guess yourself. Don't sit here and say, oh, well, if we wait a little bit longer, there will be more inventory and the best home is going to come on the market. I had a client, oh my gosh, no joke. I was showing them property in 2014 and they were very specific about their needs. I showed them several homes that would work. And they kind of kept saying, oh, we think something better is going to come. We think something's better going to come. 2017, they still had not bought a home. They had not written an offer. And in fact, 2 of the homes that I showed them and said, you really should write an offer, they wished they had. And quite frankly, at that point, I kind of gave up because I had other buyers and sellers that needed my time and attention, not somebody that was going to just keep looking at homes and saying, nope, 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 this isn't it. Guess what? 10 years later, they're still wishing they would have wrote an offer on the homes I suggested because they're still in their old home. But my point is, just don't wait too long. Don't wait years. And we are still in a seller's market. And depending on where the property is and the price point, you might have more competition, okay? Because homes that are under $1 million in a great neighborhood, good size home, don't need renovations or updates, are typically gonna have multiple offers. So think about that. Work with your agent to be strategic. Once you make the offer, one of 3 things can happen. Seller can accept it, seller can reject and do nothing, or the seller might counter offer you. Counter offers typically occur when there's multiple offers, but they also occur when the seller is saying, hey, I like your offer, I want to accept it, but there's a couple of tweaks we need to make, a couple of terms we need to come to an agreement on. You always have the ability to agree, reject it and keep it moving, or respond to the counter with different terms. But remember, the goal here when you've made an offer is to secure the home. So don't overthink this, don't be too difficult. Maybe they're picking an escrow company that you're like, I want this other escrow company because my cousin's mother works there. This is not the time to sweat those things. This is the time to shore up the deal, get the home accepted, and start the escrow process. Now, step 6 is your due diligence period. This is where home inspections take place. There are different types of home inspections. There's your general inspection, your termite inspection, chimney inspection, structural inspections, and so on. Home inspectors are trained generalists, right? They can eyeball certain things and they know code and they know basic functions. So they can, eyeball your roof and say, hey, that roof looks like it's about 20 years old. I don't see anything leaking when I went into the attic. It seems pretty solid, but it's about 20 years old. Just know the lifespan of a roof like this is usually 30 years. In 10 years, you might have to get a new roof. They are not HVAC technicians. They're not specialists. There might be other tests that you need to run depending on where you're at. Mold, air quality, lead or radon. Lead and radon is a little more common on the East Coast because homes are built on, or the land is basically bedrock. Once your offer is accepted, you have here in Los Angeles, the traditional home inspection period that has been the trend since the market's been competitive is somewhere between 3, 5, and 7 days. 7 kind of is more where people land. But if you're in fierce competition, you might have trimmed that down to 3 days or 5 days. During this time, you can perform any inspection you want. You can go to the city and pull permits and take a look at anything in the history of the home. The cost of your general inspection varies depending on the square footage of the home. On average, a home under 1,500 square feet will run you about $450. And it kind of goes from there. I always explain that going and having a home inspection is like going to your primary care physician for your annual physical, right? They know a little bit about everything. They check your systems, your breathing, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your reflexes. Likewise, your home inspector is checking the plumbing. They're checking the electrical panel. They're testing every outlet. They're testing the water pressure and the heat that's coming through the water. They're making sure that the AC works and that the heat works. But if there's a problem, they're not a specialist. Just like if in your general annual physical, you say to your doctor, hey, my elbow has been hurting me for 6 months. I fell on it and I heard a snap, but I didn't think too much because it didn't really swell. But every time I bend my elbow, it hurts. And they say, okay, let's go take an x-ray. They come back and they're like, well, there was definitely a break. And it looks like there's a bone misaligned, but you're going to need to see a specialist. I'm going to send you to an orthopedic surgeon. They send you to that orthopedic surgeon because that orthopedic surgeon specializes in bones, and they can say, okay, we can, do this, or we have to re-break it, or we can do that, but this is how we're going to fix it. The same holds true through your general inspection. If the inspector crawls through the under part of the home and they see a lot of corrosion or leaks or damage, they're going to call out what they see, and maybe you need to take it a step further. Maybe you need to have a plumber look at the home. Maybe you need to have an electrician look at the home. Maybe you need to have a home structural engineer look at the home. If you are buying a home in the hills, they're always slowly shifting and moving. Retaining walls are getting a lot of pressure, rains, water, earthquakes. All these things cause homes to shift a little bit here in Southern California. So you might need to do some extra inspections. If you are buying a home that has a fireplace and you are someone that wants to use the fireplace, for the most part, most fireplaces in Southern California are just for looks. They're not necessarily used for heating, but sometimes we have cold winters. We had a cold winter last year. We're having a cold winter this year. Maybe it's a wood-burning fireplace, but the current owners have never used it. So if it's something that you're planning to use, you might want to get it checked out. If there's a pool, you might want to have the pool checked out. So again, this is the time to go through all the inspections. When you get your inspection report, if there are items that are not working, this is the time that you and your agent can discuss that, and your agent can send a repair request, which is actually step 7, negotiating repairs. Now, repair requests are basically, like I just said, items that are not working, maybe electrical problems, maybe the heating system's not working, maybe there's a leak that is obvious coming through the roof. So based on your home inspection, you might request some repairs. It's common for some homeowners to say as is in different parts of the country when they're listing their home. They'll tell their agent, I'm selling the home as is. I'm not going to do anything. And so the agent will put in the remarks, it's sold as is. What you really need to understand as a buyer, as is basically means they don't want to do any repairs. While this might be their desire, that doesn't mean you can't request, okay? If there's something that's not functioning, that's not working, that is a health or safety hazard, you can absolutely request that. There's no law that says you as a buyer cannot request for something to be repaired that is found not working during your home inspection. Just go into this process knowing that the seller probably doesn't want to fix it. Doesn't mean they won't, but they probably don't want to. Every home is going to have things that are wrong. These are homes that are lived in, right? Unless the home is brand new and new construction, even a new construction tends to have items. And typically we refer to that as a punch list of things that need to get done, because as contractors are in and out and they're doing things, maybe they like end up breaking a piece of mirror, or maybe they've gouged the wall, or maybe they didn't put the electrical plate back on, or didn't put it on at all. Whatever things you find during your home inspection, with new construction, it's typically a punch list that's done before the home is completed and before you close and take possession. A seller, once you send your repair request, they have here in Los Angeles 3 days to respond. They can agree to the request, they can refuse the request, or they can counter the request. Like maybe you had 4 items and they're willing to do 2, but they don't have the time or the know-how, or just it usually boils down to time, the time to address some of the other issues. So they might say, we're either not going to do these, or we'll give you credit, or they might just dig in their heels and say no. Just know that just because you're purchasing a home, just like there's no law that says you can't request repairs, there's no law that says a seller has to fix things that are a problem in the home. So, like the seller, once they respond, you as a buyer have 3 options. You can agree to the repair request that they've agreed to fix. If they've rejected your request, you can say, I don't agree to this, and you can counter their rejection. All right, let's say you've gotten past all of this. Step 8 is your appraisal. If you are purchasing the home with any sort of financing, there's generally 3 outcomes. The home will appraise at the sale price. The home will appraise higher than the price you're paying to buy the home, or the home appraises lower than the sales price. Now, here's what's important to know about appraisals. Appraisals are basically for the bank. It is what determines the value of this asset for the bank, asset being the home you are about to buy and live in. If the lender feels that your asset is less than what you were willing to pay, your offer, it doesn't necessarily mean that the home isn't worth that. It just means that they have a difference of opinion. There are different times and changes with the market where sometimes appraisers get a little more conservative. Sometimes they scale back. Sometimes they just don't pick comps that are really the right fit with the type of property. They're really out there to protect the bank and the bank's asset, which is the home you're buying, right? So the goal and the hope is that it always comes in at the sale price. This is a win for everybody. When it comes back higher, though, it means you have some extra equity in your home before you even close on it, and that's amazing. I would love every single one of my buyers to be in that situation. It doesn't always happen. But if it comes in below the sale price, don't panic. This, again, is the opinion of the appraiser for the bank, and it can affect you depending on how much money you're putting down. So like if you're putting down 3.5%, it comes in low, then that's obviously a problem if you don't have extra reserves saved to come in. Just know that if it comes in low, you have options. You can either come in with more cash, we can negotiate, or you might be able to work with your lender to change your loans. And that might mean doing kind of what we've talked about before, stacking the loans in 80-20 or something like that, so that it works out. Just know this is not the end, and there's always an opportunity to renegotiate. Now, if you're doing a VA loan or an FHA loan, sometimes appraisers will call out certain repairs that must be done in order to move forward. And this is because both a VA loan and an FHA loan are government programs, and so they're a little more strict. If you have more than 3 steps leading up to the entry of the home, they require a hand wheel. If there's peeling paint on the outside, they require that to be fixed. Like it could be the porch, it could be the deck, it could be the side of the house. If there's a hole in the drywall somewhere in the inside of the house, that is going to have to be repaired. And these items have to be repaired before the appraisal will be finalized and can come in. So these repairs usually need to happen very quickly and at the cost of the seller, not the cost of you, the buyer. Step 9 is your final walkthrough. Now, this is typically done a couple days before closing, depending on your schedule, depending on the seller's schedule. I always think it's best once the home is emptied, but there are times that might not be an option depending on each schedules. This is where you want to check and make sure that the home is in the condition it was when you made your offer. If you've had repair requests, you want to make sure that the requests are done, that the repairs are done. If you've had repairs done, you might want proof of this. It might be in the way of receipts being provided. It might be that you have your original inspector come back out. They will charge you, but it's normally less than your original inspection. And I've had clients do this, especially I had a client that was buying a home and they found asbestos in the air duct, so that whole system had to be replaced. And it was a concern for my clients because they were planning to have a baby. So the original inspector came out and re-inspected that part of the house, confirmed that all the asbestos was gone, the air was flowing nice and clean, it was a fresh new system, and we were good to go. So it just depends on, again, what your requests are and whatnot. I've had some clients in the past that say, oh, I'm really busy. Do I really need to go and see the home? And the answer is yes. Like, what if, I don't know, someone threw a baseball through one of the windows and you didn't go and check before the home closed? You wouldn't know this. Or maybe there was an accident and a car ran into the side of this home that you're buying and you didn't go and check, and you go to move and you find out like a whole wall and a whole section of the home is collapsed. You want to go to your walkthrough. Here in Los Angeles and Southern California, we do a verification of the property condition, and that's just part of the many pieces of paperwork that happens during your transaction, but that's a whole different video. So after you do that, or maybe right around the same time, your lender is getting ready to wrap up this purchase for you, and you will be receiving your clear to close right around the same time. You will get what's called a CD, which is a closing disclosure, which has all the final numbers on it. Your purchase price, the fees you're paying for your loan, escrow, real estate agents, taxes, and most importantly, it has the amount of money you need to bring in to close, because again, your closing costs are based on some of these things, right? Your prepaid taxes, the filing fees, and all that stuff. What's important to know that you don't come in with a personal check or cash. And when you get wire instructions here in California, it's a wiring situation, and you go to the bank to do the wire, make sure the bank teller does a wire and not an ACH check. I have had that happen before, and that will delay your closing anywhere from 4 days to a week, because when that money leaves your account on an ACH check, it has to go to escrow, and it's going to get bounced because escrow is expecting a wire. And the communication between escrow's bank and your bank can be a very convoluted process, and it could take 3, 4, or 5 days to hash out, because your bank cannot send a wire as long as a check has already been sent. So just know that. And again, you want to look at your CD and at the figure. Your figure is typically the difference between the money you're coming down with against your loan minus your earnest money deposit that you put down at the very beginning. Here in California, once all your loan docs are signed with escrow, your loan funds after that. So sometimes it funds that very same day, or it could fund the next day. Once your loan is funded, the very last part of this process is recording of the deed at the county registrar. So typically here in California, that takes an extra day. In some states, whether it's my goodness. Sorry guys. In some states, when it's an attorney state, they're actually able to do it online now and get that process done within a couple hours. But again, here in California, it's typically the next day. Sorry about that, guys. But once that happens and you are recorded, you are able to get the keys and the home is now yours. I hope all of this information, I know this has been a long video, but I hope all this information going over the 10 steps of purchasing a home here in 2024 has been helpful to you, and that you picked up on some of the little tips that you might not be aware of or haven't ever heard before. I know everyone knows someone who's bought a home, right? But things do change, and if your parents bought their home 35 years ago, there's some parts of this process, especially when it comes to paperwork and disclosures, that are going to be a little different. But as long as you work with a real estate professional like myself or someone else, again, picking someone that you know, like, and trust, that's going to guide you through this process, and most importantly, works in this industry full-time and is not a once in a while agent, you should do just fine. I hope you guys are all doing well. Hey, if you live in another state and you watch this video and maybe you're an attorney state, or maybe you're saying, how can I find a great agent? I have a network of amazing agents that I've met over the years, either from working at the same brokerage or going to a conference, and I'd be happy to connect you to someone to help you in your area. Thanks so much for watching, guys. More coming up. In fact, I'm going to be recording a video with a lender talking about recasting and what some of those options are like as well. If you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, click the subscribe button and the bell for updates. I'll see you next time.